Hey guys, welcome to my Xilonen guide, where I'll be going over the kit of the newest 5-star support character who's centered around buffing your team's damage. I'll be discussing her kit, artifact sets, weapons, constellations, teams, and pull value. If you do enjoy content like this, then do leave a like as it helps a lot. Anyways, let's get into her kit. Now, her elemental skill allows Xilonen to enter her Nightsoul state for about 9 seconds, where her normal and plunging attacks will be converted into geo damage and gain defense scaling. Her Nightsoul state also lets her climb faster along walls like Kachina, but the duration of this ability varies in the open world depending if you're on Natlan or sprinting. But the main part of her skill is the 36% red shred that she provides. At the beginning of her Nightsoul state, she'll start with 45 Nightsoul points, and to activate the red shred, she needs to gain another 45 points. This is where her passive comes into play. If Xilonen has at least 2 Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, or Electro characters in the party, she'll gain an additional 35 points when her normal and plunging attacks hit opponents. So she needs to attack the enemy twice to activate her red shred. When she does activate her elemental skill, Xilonen will gain 3 Geosemplars, but depending on the elements of her teammates, the Geosemplars can change elements. This is limited to the elements mentioned earlier, so she won't work with Dendro or Anemo characters in the party. But if she has less than 2 source samples that undergo the elemental conversion, then her normal and plunging attacks will deal an additional 30% damage. This allows Xilonen to be played as a support or a main DPS depending on the team composition you have. Xilonen's skill produces 4 geoparticles, but since Xilonen will be on field when this happens and will need to remain on field to activate her red shred, she'll end up capturing those particles, preventing you from funneling those particles to your other teammates. Now her elemental burst initially does 1 large hit of geo damage, but it also functions similarly to her passive. If she has 2 or more source samples that have undergone elemental conversion, then she'll also heal the active character, but if she has less than 2 source samples that change, then she'll deal an additional 2 instances of elemental burst damage. It has an energy cost of 60 with a 15-second cooldown, so it won't be hard to use every rotation since you're already capturing all the particles from her skill. Moving on to her other 2 passives, Portable Armor Sheath grants Xilonen with a Nightsoul Burst effect, where if she maxes out her Nightsoul bar, then she can gain another Nightsoul Burst, and when this happens, Xilonen's defense can increase by 20% for up to 15 seconds. And just like other Natlan characters, she has an Exploration passive, which essentially increases the duration of her overworld aspect of the elemental skill when she's in Natlan. Xilonen has 2 main artifact sets that she can use depending on your playstyle. If you want to use her as a main DPS, then the 4-piece Obsidian Codex set is your best bet, as it provides her with 15% damage bonus, and when she's in her Nightsoul Blessing state on field, she'll gain an additional 40% crit rate buff for 6 seconds. There are other DPS sets that you can run, just like Shimenawa's and Husk, but in general, Obsidian is her best in slot. The main pieces you'd want to look out for is a defense sands, a geo damage goblet, and a crit rate or crit damage circlet depending on your crit ratio. For her substats, you want to prioritize defense, energy recharge, and crit rolls to maximize your damage. Looking at her supportive side, Cinder City is a no-brainer as it provides her teammates with a huge 40% damage bonus depending on the element that's crystallized, but it also provides Xilonen with 12 energy instead of 6 because of her passive, alleviating most of her energy needs. There is a chance that in the future there may be another Cinder City user who you might want to use alongside Xilonen, and if that is the case, then the 4-piece Archaic Petra set may be useful, but that's just speculation. Since her healing from her burst is based on her defense, you'd want to use a full defense build, consisting of a defense sand, defense goblet, and a defense/healing bonus circlet. To consistently burst with Xilonen, you'd want to go for around 170% energy recharge, so if you can't hit that breakpoint with the defense sands, then I'd recommend switching to an energy recharge one to make her rotations more comfortable since all you're sacrificing is some extra healing. Now, Xilonen can use a variety of different weapons, but if you're playing her as a support, then her best options are either Favonius, the new craftable weapon, or her signature weapon, Peak Patrol Song. Favonius is a great free-to-play weapon as it helps her teammates gain their burst quicker since it provides particles, but the only issue is that you do need to build some crit rate stats on Xilonen in order to receive those particles. Flute is another free-to-play option, and it's probably the best one to go for if you don't have Favonius since it has a high defense percentage, and it also increases Xilonen's defense when she uses her elemental skill. Her signature weapon, Peak Patrol Song, is her best in slot since it provides her with extra defense, and it also provides her teammates with an additional 25.6% elemental damage bonus as long as you can reach the cap of 3.2k defense. But it's not necessary to pull for the weapon, since other weapons just like Favonius are perfectly usable. For her main DPS build, you can still use her on her signature weapon, as it does provide Xilonen with an additional 20% damage bonus, plus that high defense percentage will scale well with her normal and plunging attacks. Other weapons you can use are Chori's signature weapon, which is on the weapon banner running alongside Xilonen's signature, and any other crit or defense substat weapons. Harbinger of Dawn is a great free-to-play option for Xilonen, since it provides her with a ridiculous amount of crit value since it's a 3-star weapon. Xilonen's vertical investment ceiling looks impressive for a support, since she provides some crazy supportive capabilities, especially at C2. But looking at her first constellation, Xilonen basically increases the duration of her night soul state by about 3 seconds, which is great for exploration and DPS Xilonen, but a bit useless for her supportive side. But she also grants the active character some interruption resistance when her soul samples are active. However, the level of interruption resistance is quite weak, and it's equivalent to Cyno's and Ayato's elemental burst and skill. Xilonen C2 is a huge buff to her teammates, as it provides them with different buffs depending on their elements, whilst her soul samples are active, and she also provides Geo Shred indefinitely. These buffs that she does provide do vary in strength depending on the element of the characters. For example, the attack buff for the Pyro characters and the crit damage buff for the Cryo characters aren't too strong, since these stats are already oversaturated by characters of the elements. For example, Pyro carries and sub DPSs typically use Bennett, who already provides a lot of attack, whilst Cryo characters typically use sets like Blitzestrayer or Marechaussee Hunter, which provides a lot of crit rate and forces those carries to invest in other stats, typically crit damage. The Geo, Hydro, and Electro buffs on the other hand are extremely strong, as these stats aren't oversaturated. For example, the max HP buff for Hydro characters. These buffs will have a larger impact on these characters of these elements, so do take that into consideration. But also do understand that characters can only obtain the buffs pertaining to their elements and can't use buffs of the other ones. This is also the constellation I'd recommend stopping at, since her other constellations aren't as valuable compared to her C2. Xilonen C3 increases the level of her elemental skill, increasing the skill's res shred by 6%. Whilst this does seem impressive on paper, do remember that res shred past 0 is only halved, so in actuality, she's only providing 3%. Her Constellation 4 provides a Yunjin-like buff for the active character, where their next 6 normal attacks, charged attacks, and plunging attacks will gain a flat damage bonus based on Xilonen's defense, and if that character hits more than one enemy, then the trigger count will be consumed based on the number of opponents hit. This constellation might seem strong on paper, but it's only really useful for single target characters. Her C5 increases the level of her elemental burst by 3, and her C6 essentially turns her into a main DPS, but also provides a similar healing effect to Farina. Xilonen C6 is a little bit more practical compared to Farina, since you're already normal attacking to gain the resistance shred, and with her C6 you can now heal all the party members in your team. But this doesn't make it worth going all the way to C6, unless you really want to. Looking at Xilonen's vertical investment value, it's clear to see that her C2 is her most impactful constellation, but to get there you do need to get her C1. I would personally recommend that if you don't have the pulls for her C2 but still want to get it, I'd recommend holding off, and save for her future rerun, or try to get her signature weapon, since her C1 doesn't really provide much value for her supportive capabilities. But at the same time, don't feel forced to get her signature weapon, as weapons like Favonius can provide a unique value for your team and make playing Xilonen a lot more comfortable. Since Xilonen is such a great support, she can fit into a lot of teams and can basically slot herself into wherever Kazuha can go, but she does provide a unique advantage over Kazuha in certain teams, just like double Hydro Vape, Freeze, Aggravate with Nahida, etc. With these teams, it's hard for Kazuha to swell the main element of the DPS, so whilst he does provide a large buff for the sub DPSs, the main DPS will stay unbuffed. Xilonen, on the other hand, provides an easier playstyle, as her elemental skill essentially guarantees that she'll shred the resistance of her other teammates as long as the requirements are fulfilled. But something to keep in mind is that Kazuha does provide that unique value with his grouping, since it helps a lot in AoE situations where enemies may be scattered around. Xilonen can also join Farina in the double Hydro core, since she can provide insane healing to increase their fanfare stacks, and she can guarantee the res shred for the Hydro characters and the on-field character. Just like Yellen and Xingqiu, you can also use both Xilonen and Kazuha together to bring some insane damage bonus and resistance shred to the team, and boost your main DPS's damage even further. But this only really works in mono-element teams just like Nuvula or Arlecchino. Xilonen does suffer with the same problem as Kazuha, but not to the same extent. Since she does need to crystallize the element for her Cinder City buff to proc, it may be hard to crystallize the on-field character's element, and you might be missing out on that huge 40% damage bonus. which does suck, but at least you still get the resistant shred. And that's it for the full Xilonen guide. She's one of the strongest supports in the game and definitely worth investing in. If you're on the fence as to whether you should pull for Xilonen, just have a look at your account and see if your main carries are Pyro, Hydra, Cryo, or Electro, and if those characters rely on the buffs like Resistance Shred or Elemental Damage bonus. If the answer is no, you can probably hold off and pull for a support that might benefit your account, and if the answer is yes, then you can always just wait for a Kazuha or Xilonen rerun. That's it for today. So if you did enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. And with that, I'm out.